Hello students, welcome to Algebra 2. My name is Stephen Reginald III. Most of my students at the university just call me Mr. Reggie, so you may do the same. We are going to be looking at today how to graph the sine, or the cosine function. Last week you learned sine. This week we will do cosine. The nice thing is they're very, very similar, okay? Remember the sine function. These are your important points. 0, 0, pi over 2, 1, pi 0, 3 pi over 2, negative 1, and at 2 pi, it's back where it started, and it kind of looks like this, right? And it just repeats over ad nauseum. Okay, let's try just to make sure we remember how to do it. Let's try this one. Let's see. Need to go minus pi over 2 plus pi over 2. Remember, sine functions are interesting because instead of using regular numbers for the x-axis, we use radians. So, this is a horizontal or phase shift. So we will start with these points. Let's see, pi over 2, 1. And then we will shift each one pi over 2 to the left. So this point moves there. This one moves there. Right there. Right there. See, that one moves over to here. That one moves there, there, there. So here is our graph. Whoop. There we go. That is sine of x plus pi over 2. Now the interesting thing about this point, this is the graph of cosine. So sine of x plus pi over 2 is the same thing as cosine. So the cosine graph is simply the sine graph shifted a little bit. So for cosine, if it's 0 radians, the y value is 1. If it's pi over 2, it's 0. Pi is negative 1. 3 pi over 2 is 0. And 2 pi is back where it started at 1. Okay? So the cosine graph is almost the same as sine, it just starts at 1 instead of 0. Okay, so they're very similar. Let's try a couple and see if we can figure these out, okay? Here we go. Let's try y equals negative 2 times the cosine of x. Notice I have my 5 important points here. You should add those to your notes. Write them on your brain, wherever it is you Americans store things. Your smartphone, I believe. Let's see, pi, 2 pi, negative pi, negative 2 pi. All right, we have a reflection over the x-axis and a stretch of 2. So we're going to multiply all of our y values by negative 2. So instead of 0, 1, we're going to start down here at negative 2. It's going to still be 0 there. Instead of negative 1 times negative 2 is positive 2. Back to 0, and then back down to negative 2. And just like with sine, once you get those first 5, you can usually just sort of follow the pattern to get the others. So there is our graph of y equals negative 2 times the cosine of x. We should write down, so our domain is all real numbers. The range, remember, find the lowest point. So the lowest point is negative 2, less than or equal to y, less than or equal to the highest point is positive 2. Our period, remember the period you learned last week is 2 pi divided by b. Well, this one does not have a b. Remember, b is the number in front of the x. So this one does not have a b. That means b is 1. 2 pi divided by 1 is just 2 pi. So our period is 2 pi. What else is there? Let's see. The amplitude. Remember, the amplitude is just a. So it would be 2 on this one. If there is no a, then the amplitude is always 1. Oh, let's see. What else? So one more thing. That's it, I guess. Okay, there we go. Y equals negative 2 cosine of x. How about, let's try this one. Y equals cosine of 1/2 x plus 4. I see two transformations on this one. We have horizontal stretch or shrink. We have a b, right? b equals 1/2 on this one. And then we also have a vertical shift. Right? It moves up 4. That's the other thing we're missing here. The midline on this one is y equals 0. Remember, the midline will always be y equals 0 unless there's a vertical shift like this one. Okay, we need to figure out the period. So the period will be 2 pi divided by 1/2. Remember, divide by 1/2 is the same as multiplying by the reciprocal. So our period on this one is 4 pi. Some of you figured out last week you can kind of cheat a little bit and just change the scale on your x-axis. So instead of making my graph wider, I just changed the scale. It's a good way to kind of cheat it. All right, let's see. We're going to start at the top. Except for we have a, oh no wait, we need to go up 4. So 1, 2, 3, 4. There's my midline. Right there at y equals 4. And then we are going to start 1 above that. So we're not starting at 1, we're starting 1 above the midline. And then it's going to go down to 0. 1 below the midline. Back to 0. 1 above the midline. And then once I get those 5, I can put the other ones in. There we go. So that is a cosine graph shifted up 4. So our midline is y equals 4. And because it has a b, we use this formula, 2 pi over b, to figure out the period. Once we knew the period, we could set our x-axis on whatever scale we wanted. There we go. Let's try one more here. Going to grab a spot of tea real quick. So good. You Americans with your energy drinks and stuff make me laugh. For me, just a fine cup of Earl Grey will work. Alright, let's try this one. Y equals cosine of x minus pi minus 2. Let's see, 2 pi, pi, negative pi, negative 2 pi. Alright, I see right away we have a vertical shift down 2. So my midline is right there at y equals negative 2. We also have a horizontal shift, or a phase shift as we call them with sine and cosine functions. So we're going to take all of these points and move them pi to the right. So let's graph these ones first. Let's see, 0 and 1 above our midline. Back to the midline, 1 below the midline, back to the midline, and 1 above. We're going to take all of those points and shift them pi that way. Okay? So I'll use a different color here. Let's do it in blue, okay? So I take this point, I shift it pi to the right. I take this point, I shift it pi to the right, same spot. This one, pi to the right. This one, pi to the right would be, oh, about there, I suppose. And then let's see. That means we have these points here. If I follow the pattern, I got this point again. The next one would be down here, back to 0, up to the top, back to 0, down to the bottom. There we are. There's our graph. So we have a vertical shift down 2, our midline moved down 2, and then we shifted all the points pi to the right. That's about all there is to it. If you did well last week with the sine, cosine is not that much different, okay? Mr. Young will give you a few practice problems to do over the week. He wanted me to remind you, let me see here, there are only a few weeks left of school, so persevere, he says. Persevere. You guys have a good week. Let Mr. Young know if you need help with this, and hopefully I will see you again soon. Oh, what a pleasant day.